Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. My name is George Binns, and I'm here with my co-host, Elliot Margolis, and we're very pleased to have with us tonight as our guest, Stuart L. Gardner, attorney at law. And before we get into that discussion with Stuart, I want to have a quick top of the page to follow up on a show we did about 4 months ago. We invited the Beverly Chief of Police, John LaSure, to come talk with us about the opioid situation. And one of the concerns he mentioned at the time was that when somebody is OD'd and the police find him, they give them a dose of Narcan and they pop back into the real world. Then they just jump up and they can do anything they want, either run off and get another fix or just take off and wait until the opium in their system overcomes the Narcan and they go back into an OD. And he was lamenting at the time that there was no authority to put them into protective custody. Well, as it turns out, as part of the 2017 Massachusetts state budget, they put in those magic words, and now there is an extension of the protective custody law to include people who are found OD'd on opioids and have been given a Narcan dose. So there has been some progress. Would like to think that the governor watched our show and that's why he signed the bill, but I don't think my head is that big yet. Anyway, what started this discussion off, what we're going to have tonight, was I was reading through Wall Street Journal, and there was an article in there about the delicate and difficult untangling of in-laws' financial lives. And it turns out there's been a series of articles in the Wall Street Journal about the difficult, delicate untangling of our parents' lives. Then there's, when is probate required? Massachusetts law and probate alternatives. Dust off your estate plan and 10 common pitfalls. Protect yourself from elder scams. Power of attorney. 11 tips to protect you from identity theft and related taxes. Then you can get a Massachusetts directive, advance directive, and that's a massive document. Interesting enough, it comes out of Alexandria, Virginia. And then finally, you can get a Massachusetts medical orders for life-sustaining treatment. And this gets to be very confusing. So we have invited Stu to come and tell us, you know, what should the kids be doing to get an understanding of what their parents' situation is before it's too late to unravel a mess or it becomes a mess. And at the same time, what should the big kids, us seniors, be doing to get things ready? Because sooner or later, we're going to need help. And how do we get it? Now, you make an appearance every so often at the senior center and do a consult with various people.
That's right.
What kind of problems do you see them having?
Well, there's lots of problems, and thank you, George. Thank you, Elliot, for having me on. Usually, most of the time, people want to protect their assets. They're very concerned about one or both of them needing to go into a nursing home and asking for some sort of authority, usually Mass Health, to help them pay for it. Now, unfortunately, what Mass Health will do is if you have money, they'll ask for it. If you have assets that aren't liquid, like a house, it's potential they could put a lien on it. That's most of the problems that I see at the senior center, and it's very persuasive in Massachusetts. Pervasive, going back to your earlier question, what's the most important thing you can do? I would say, if I have just a little bit of time to talk, would be set up a basic plan. A basic plan includes a will, a healthcare proxy, and a power of attorney.
Okay, before you get to what's a healthcare proxy and what's a power of attorney?
All right, we'll start with the power of attorney. A power of attorney allows someone else to sign documents for your behalf. Not that I was around, maybe you gentlemen were, in the old days. A spouse could,
I'm going to talk to your father about this.
A spouse could go into a bank and say, you know, my wife is sick, let me sign this document for her. And oftentimes it was done. Maybe it was an easier time, maybe it was, maybe a naive time. But nowadays, everyone needs the legal right to sign on someone's behalf, especially with marriage laws changing and whatnot. So a power of attorney is a document that allows your wife, if you sign it for her, to sign on your behalf. She can fill out a tax return for you, go into a bank, deal with stock transactions, anything that you might need to do, she can step in your shoes. Very important, because when someone is out of the country or in a hospital or maybe have lost their faculties, it's very difficult to get stuff done if you cannot sign their name. That's a power of attorney.
How does this work when you have like a joint account?
So financial institutions have taken a cue also and made lots of types of different accounts. So there's an account where you're both joint tenants and you both can sign on all the assets. So you have a joint bank account, there's $22,000 in it, you both can sign on it. But then there's accounts that are different than that, that it's more like tenants in common, where it's separate accounts, but it's in the same account. And you might need the power of attorney to access that account. And then certainly you'll need the power of attorney to access anything in your spouse's or the other person's name alone.
Yeah.
Like a stock account or whatnot.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot of times when I would call up like Mass Health or Social Security to ask them about something relative to my wife. Is she there?
Yeah.
Can she give you permission to talk with us? And it gets to be rather difficult.
Security laws have changed over time, especially over the past 10 years. Have made it very difficult to get information on anyone. Even now, it can be somewhat of a challenge with the power of attorney, but you definitely need that document. Without it, you have to go to court and you have to file something called a conservatorship. And you had mentioned the word probate court. Probate court, once you need to do something there, you open a world of questions. Who can come in? You have to sometimes put an ad in the paper. It can cost you lots of money. Relatives can come in and say, you know what, you, the wife, doesn't have best interests of George. I have George's best interest, and I should be in charge of George's finances. So you create a whole host of other problems.
Which documents why you need to do it when you're in.
When you have your faculties, exactly.
Yeah,
when you have your faculties, and oftentimes my clients, they're married and they want their spouse to be the first one, so your wife would be the first one, but then a trusted child usually, or one or two, and that's usually there's a succession. So if my wife can't do it, I'll have my eldest daughter do it. She's got the wherewithal to do it, and then if she can't do it, I'll have my eldest son do it. He's got the wherewithal. So that's the power of attorney.
Yeah.
Then you had also mentioned a healthcare proxy.
Yep.
Another very important document. So a proxy is the ability to make a vote for someone else. But a healthcare proxy allows someone to make healthcare decisions based upon what is best for you. Oftentimes,
What is best for them, not for you.
What is best for the individual, forgive me. What's best for the person that's hurt.
Right.
You had mentioned the word advance directive. They used to have just an advance directive. An advance directive is what I want or don't want done to me if I can't answer those questions. Do I want invasive medical treatment? If I'm, I'm not a doctor, but if I'm diagnosed critically brain dead, do I want a feeding tube? Do I want to remove the feeding tube? That was all in the advance directive. The problem with an advance directive by itself, there was no one in charge. So doctors and relatives and spouses and friends would fight over. Even though the advance directive existed, the person was lying there, not be able to help, make decisions, and so there was an argument. So the healthcare proxy gained favor. So the proxy is the person who's charged with making those medical decisions based upon maybe the advance directive.
So that means you have to have two documents, and
So yes.
you have to have the statement of this is what I want done and this is what I don't want done, and then you have to have somebody who
Exactly. Most good
make that happen.
Yeah, most good planners will have both in one document, and they'll go, here's what you should put in your advance directive, and here's your medical proxy. And oftentimes the medical proxy says, your advance directive says, I want you to talk to the doctors. I want you to get two doctors. It's not, you're not going to cavalierly decide to pull the plug on someone. I know a lot of my clients are fearful that, well, what's going to happen? No one's going to do that. Oftentimes, you can only designate one person, but oftentimes in my documents, I will say that the mother, the father, would like the children to consult with each other, with the doctor, with whatnot, and make what's best. There is one person in charge, but make the best decision for my health or whatnot.
I just went through that basically in the past 5 years with both of my parents.
Yes.
And having to make certain decisions, the DNR does not cover everything with the do not resuscitate.
Yes.
That does not cover everything. And so we had to make decisions. And in our case, fortunately, we were lucky, it was easy. Both my parents at one point in time had Alzheimer's.
Yep.
And they weren't who they were.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so that's one thing that worked in our favor because we didn't have to make a difficult decision.
Sure, the decision was already made for you guys.
Yeah.
Now the proxy is also another very important document because if you don't have it, again, you have to go to court again, probate court, and it can get expensive, and you have to get something called a guardianship. And again, that opens a whole host of other problems, and it could open, relatives could come in. Excuse me, oftentimes with guardianships, if certain types of medication need to be given to the individual, such as antipsychotics, you need a special, something called the Rogers petition. You have to jump through hoops, you have to file plans with the court, and it can get very expensive and time consuming. And that's another thing that you can do, and most of the time you want to hire, I always recommend hiring a lawyer, but I'm sure there's ways to do it without hiring a lawyer, that you want to do those two basic things. The power of attorney, so you can sign documents for someone, and the healthcare proxy, so you can make medical-related decisions for that person.
And I can honestly tell you, Stuart, that this is one of the few times that we agree because...
This might be the only time we agree, Elliot.
Because being through it recently, you do need those two documents.
Yes.
It makes things so much easier.
Yes. And then lastly, for the basic plan, I said a will. A will is a document that says basically where you want your stuff to go when you die. Mm-hmm. But it's a little more in-depth than that. It says who's in charge, you know, who's going to run my estate. Sometimes people like to make specific gifts. I want this piece of jewelry to go to this person. I want $5,000 to go to this grandson. And items like that. If you don't make a will, you die what they call intestate. And then that, again, has to go to probate. A will has to go to probate, too. But you die intestate, and it follows the laws of succession in Massachusetts, which most of the time might be what you want. My spouse, then my kids, then my grandkids, and whatnot. But sometimes it might not be. You certainly, you know, the laws of intestate, certainly don't know if you want to make any specific gifts.
Well, and one of the reasons I think the will is important is it may not be, I mean, you may have had 2 or 3 spouses,
yes,
but you've only got your original kids, for instance.
Sure.
And you want your kids to be ahead of the spouse.
Of course.
And that needs to be pretty well clear.
Yeah, and the situation you pose is a little more complex because there's elective share rights for spouses and whatnot, but I definitely agree. One thing I like to do, and it's not part of the basic plan, George, so I'm going a little bit off topic, is something called a trust. Everybody talks to me about trusts.
I was going to go there, so there you go.
A trust is a legal entity that holds title to property. That's the definition. But what it is it's a document. It's an entity that you create, or a lawyer creates for you, that holds title to the property. And what you can do in the trust is you can get really specific about how you want things. My first wife, my second wife, my first kids, my third, this goes here. It can get a lot more specific, and most of the time, the trust does not need to be probated. So we go back a will, or if you die intestate, you got to go to the probate court, and they sort of they have jurisdiction over it, and they sort of oversee it. Whereas a trust, if it's done right, you can avoid probate and those fees as well.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it seems to me something like that when somebody passes away and going to probate. How long does probate take?
So it depends on which courthouse. It's by county. Essex County's pretty good. I want to make this on tape. Essex County's pretty good. There are other closer counties that aren't as good, which I won't mention by name. So it can take time. And if the transfer of funds is essential, maybe a young parent, or whatnot, probate's not your best decision. If transferring of the money and the property and the stuff, it doesn't have an immediate emergency nature to transfer, you can go through probate. But it can take 6 months, 9 months. At the process, you have to put it down in the paper, you have to go to court. If you want to sell a house, you have to make a motion to the court to sell a house. It's, for lack of a better word, it's perfunctory. It's just a process, and if no one disputes it, it can go smoothly, but even smoothly, it can take 6 months. Now, I've been involved in a number of cases where it, on its face, would appear smooth, but the old adage, relatives come out of the woodwork. Mm-hmm. Uncle George loved me.
Yeah.
He told me he wanted me to have the house. You know, Uncle Elliot said, well, he got $50,000. And unfortunately, the probate court is the people's court. Anyone can come in. You don't necessarily need a lawyer, and you can kind of make any claims you want, which might not have any validity to them, but they're still going to take time, effort, money to fight. And a trust can often avoid that. A trust, if, say for example, all you have is your house. You know, most people have their house and they have their Social Security payments, right? So they say, well, you know what I want to do? I want to put my house in trust. And you can do that. And you can say, I don't want my house sold. It was where everyone grew up. And if at all possible, I want, one of the children to live there, but the other kids, can own some of the house still. And the child that lives there has to pay rent. And you can kind of set it up so that your kids aren't fighting when you pass over what you had left. Because oftentimes, unfortunately, I see that. And you certainly don't want that to happen. So trusts are great instruments to move property upon your death.
One of the things that I found very difficult to work with was Mass Health.
That's you and everyone else.
And you get somebody who's basically that's what they do. They help you with Mass Health.
Right.
Can cost you a fortune.
Oh, yeah.
And, here we are. You got your state reps, your state senators trying to do what's best for you, and all they're doing is killing you.
Yeah. I think the conflict exists when the parents, the elderly parents, they want to protect their house for their kids. They've worked hard their whole lives, now they own the house, and their fear is that a nursing home, a $10,000, $12,000 a month nursing home, will eat up all their equity. So they come to me and say, what can I do? It's a little more complex. There is no easy answer. There's a lot of lawyers out there. There's a lot of planners out there that try to help with mass health-related planning, but basically it's more something called an irrevocable trust. And the short of this, and this is not, there's more to it, but the short of it is that if you can't touch it, neither can the government. So what the elderly people say is, I can live there, and it's my house, but I can't sell it, I can't borrow against it, I can't do a lot of things with it, but I can remain there until I die. But it's not my house anymore. It now belongs to this trust, and when I die, the house will pass to my beneficiaries, my kids. And I don't want to get too complex, but there's something called a 5-year look back, which maybe you've heard of.
Yeah.
Which means the government for the next 5 years basically is going to say, when you transfer that house to the irrevocable trust, they're going to say for the next 5 years, it wasn't a real transfer. I know you transferred it, and I know you tried to do all this stuff, you spent all this money, but for 5 years, it's called a penalty period. And I know it's really complex, and the only thing I can suggest is call me or call a lawyer. But that's what a lot of my clients like to do, is try to, and I completely understand their concerns. You worked hard, you put into the system, you don't feel like the system should suck everything out of your life. You want your money and you want at least the house to go to your kids.
Well, the government has this attitude that everything that you own belongs to them. And to me, the 5-year waiting period is basically saying, okay, you know you're going to die in 2 years or 3 years because you've got cancer or you've got something else. So basically, screw you, we're going to take all your money.
Well, they've got lots of expenses, the government.
Yeah.
And that's our government in action.
Yes.
Yeah. The thing we have seen is it used to be a 1-year look back, then it was a 2-year.
Yes.
And it's been creeping up, and they're just going to keep grabbing more.
I've heard rumors that there's going to be about a 7-year look back.
Yeah, that's because medicine has gotten so good lately, they're keeping you alive longer.
Right.
And so the government wants to get the money away from you. So that's what we're talking about. So one of the things George started off with was when you get his age.
Oh,
I'm not there yet.
I got you.
So when you get his age. Sorry,
132?
But
No.
but
If I make it to October, I will celebrate the 40th anniversary of my 39th birthday.
Excellent. Congratulations.
but let's talk about somebody your age, Stu.
Yes.
Okay. Isn't it very important for somebody your age to plan ahead for something like this now?
Gosh. So the
With all due respect.
Sure. I'm very young. I actually just celebrated my 47th birthday the other day. You lose a lot of control with these types of irrevocable trusts. There are other types of things you can do. There's long-term care insurance, which is expensive, but not terribly expensive if you're young.
Yeah.
There are other things that you can do to try to protect assets. There's There's life insurance. You know, I still can get $500,000 life insurance for $400, $500 a year, which you know might be cost prohibitive for some people, but that's not a terrible amount of money, and that money can go right to my beneficiaries. You know, that if that's my concern, is to make sure that, you know, my daughter or my children are not left destitute, and that's the most important thing for someone my age. Let me just digress. Another very important thing for someone my age is you can't leave money to a minor. So my daughter's 14. I technically, legally cannot leave her money. If I said all my money to my daughter, it would go through the court system, and they would hire a guardian ad litem, a lawyer, to basically represent my daughter and hold the money. Yeah. That's why a trust is very important for those with young children, because you can set up a trust. You don't even have to fund it, but you set it up and you say, in the unfortunate event that both myself and my wife, or you know, if the single parent dies, all my money is to go to this trust. My sister Diane will manage it and take care of my daughter. The money will be for the benefit of my daughter, but it's to stay in trust, you know, maybe until she's 30 or 35. I don't know if you want a 14-year-old or an 18-year-old to get a hold of $500,000 when her parents are dead. It might not end up in the right places, if you know what I mean. And you have to be prudent about that. So yeah, so someone my age would want to seriously consider a family trust to hold the money should the unfortunate circumstances exist that they both pass.
And that gets to be a very difficult decision, because you don't want to, like you said, turn into a red Ferrari at the age of 25 or something.
A red Ferrari I could deal with. It's the drug addictions and other things that I'd be concerned about. But I understand completely.
Yeah. So I guess the question comes down to is, you've rattled off a half a dozen or more of these.
Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the complication of the real world.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is the way it's turned out to be. And dealing with this thing, you know, the half an hour we're going to be here tonight is not going to prime anybody to say, oh yeah, we do this, this, and this. And I call up Nolo and I get a free one copy of it. We'll just fill in the blanks kind of thing. When you're talking about dealing with an attorney, what kind of a process is this? Weeks, months?
For myself, and I can't speak for all attorneys, I can say that if it's a simple process and all you really want is a will and a proxy and a power of attorney, I can get it done. I can turn around in a couple of weeks, a week or two.
Yeah.
It's not super expensive. I'll tell you this: it's under $1,000. It might even be under $750.
Yeah.
But when you want irrevocable trusts, or when you want a trust for your children, or when you want something a little more complex, it can, you know, anywhere from 2 to 8 weeks. I can usually get something done in 2 months. Usually people come to me, the younger people come to me because it's some event has happened. A friend has died, or they're going overseas for the first time, or something, and time is always of the essence. So I try to accommodate I can. You know, there's a lot of good quality estate planners in this area. I'm just one of them.
Yeah.
I would, definitely recommend beginning the process now, especially for the elderly. The power of attorney and the healthcare proxy are essential documents to make sure that the people that you trust. I don't want to say this the wrong way. I know it's very political. A lot of my elderly clients have 2 or 3 or 4 kids. They love their kids, but don't trust a couple of them. And maybe it's just because they've had some, unlucky breaks. Make sure that you get these documents done and you put the people that you want in authority, if that makes sense.
Well, I think that the different way to put it is you get to know your kids after a while. And some of them have the same attitudes, perspective on life that you have. And you want them to continue in the vein that you have created it.
That's the wisdom of your years, George.
And then there's the cases of you got this wild flower that, have a great time. It's great at a party, but like I said, you don't want it to end up with a red Ferrari.
Yes.
But
I know going through it, it's tough. It's tough to go through it, and the fact that we knew what to do and we did it made things a lot easier. But the mass health thing,
it's a big challenge.
That was a real big challenge.
It's a big challenge.
And the government does make it very difficult for you. And they take anybody who works, the average person doesn't make a ton of money, isn't going to end up having millions of dollars.
Sure.
And you have to go to a nursing home. A nursing home is $10,000 a month.
Yeah, they're very expensive.
So and sometimes you're in a nursing home 4 or 5 years. Takes a lot of money, and here you see all the money that you've worked for all these years go to the nursing home, and I think it's once you get $100,000 down to $100,000, I think Mass Health takes over.
I'm not exactly sure about that rule. I do know that they'll put a lien on any assets that you have. I knew that, and you can't have a lot of liquid assets when you apply for Mass Health.
You can't have a lot of liquid assets.
$2,000, I believe, is the
yeah. I mean, it's.
Let me just say one thing. I know a lot of my clients or a lot of people I see at the senior center are afraid. No spouse is going to get kicked out of a house. So if mom and dad live in the house and dad's got to go to an assisted living, no one's going to come and knock on the door and say, "Mom, get out." That never happens. What they will do is put a lien on it, and then when she passes or has to sell it, they'll collect their fee.
But they basically, Mass Health basically takes you down to very little.
Yeah.
And
yes.
And after working your whole life, it's
sad. I agree.
That's kind of tough.
Now, before you segue into the next one, you keep talking about getting help. And we did a discussion a while back with the chief of staff of Jerry Paracella's office, and had personal experience with him. A granddaughter had some problems with Mass Health, and he was extremely helpful. So that's one resource, at least that I know of, that you can go to your state rep, and they will intercede for you.
Sure.
And point you in the right direction.
Jerry's
Took a year, but...
All right, and at that, Stuart, I have to cut you off because we at George, Gail, and I have won an award for our show, and I don't know if you can put in on this, but it's the best government profile independent producers, and this was a national award, and we won it.
Yeah, and that was the show we won it for when Angel Donahue Rodriguez came and explained to us how the Chief of Staff's office
Congratulations.
works. Yeah.
So we won that, and it was in the Beverly Citizen, a nice article in the Beverly Citizen about it. So I want to point out that between our staff, our camera people, our director, and everybody who helps us, I want to thank them for helping us get this award.
Right.
And I hope we can continue to process good shows like this one.
Thank you.
And maybe get an award again next year. But this was a nice thing to get. It's great for BevCam, great for us, and we certainly appreciate a national award. It's pretty impressive, and we're very happy to have received it. So you are watching an award-winning show. And thank you for watching the award-winning show. And we will be back again with other great guests like Stuart. And maybe, Stuart, we could have you again.
Sure, I'd love to.
There's so much more to talk about.
Happy to talk. Something I have a
I
gift to do.
Thank you very much. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.